Y&R Spoilers Next week reveal Nikki's party turns into chaos. Nikki's birthday party was held in one of the most magnificent mansions in Genoa City, where every corner of the room was lavishly decorated. Warm yellow lights covered the room, glasses of wine were sparkling, laughter echoed along with melodious music. Nikki appeared like a true queen, her beauty and charisma were not faded by time, surrounded by familiar faces. Victor coldly observed, Victoria with a secretive and unpredictable expression. Nick smiled lightly as if to hide his worries, and Diane was radiant as she held Jack's arm, her eyes shining with happiness. But no one expected that, in that seemingly peaceful atmosphere, a darkness was quietly creeping in, waiting for the right moment to sow chaos. As the birthday cake was brought out, everyone raised their glasses. A strange noise rang out from the end of the hallway, leading to the restroom area for distinguished guests. The sound was not loud but enough to attract the attention of a few people, but no one thought that it was a signal for an impending tragedy. Just a few minutes later, while everyone was still busy congratulating Nikki, a loud scream rang out, making the air quiet. Diane, with a panicked face, ran out of the bathroom. Her eyes were blank, her lips were trembling, her screams drowned out the music and laughter around her. Everyone rushed towards her, only in time to hear Diane mumble, "Jack. Jack, blood." Diane almost collapsed, had to cling to Kyle's hand to keep from collapsing on the floor. Kyle immediately rushed into the bathroom. The scene before his eyes seemed to haunt him for the rest of his life. Jack lay motionless, blood soaked his shirt and stained the shiny tiled floor. His breathing was weak, his face pale as if his life had been drained. No one dared to believe their eyes. Jack, who had always been a symbol of strength and resilience, now lay there, fragile between life and death. Kyle trembled as he picked up the phone to call for help, his voice hoarse with horror. Diane still couldn't take her eyes off Jack. Every second seemed like centuries. Tears kept rolling down her cheeks, mixed with pain and extreme fear. Meanwhile, all the guests were in a state of panic. Victor immediately asked everyone to stay calm, ordered all the entrances to be locked. No one was allowed to leave the villa until the police arrived to investigate. The police quickly arrived, sealed off the scene, and each guest was questioned one by one. Kyle hugged his mother, his eyes filled with pain and anger. Diane kept sobbing, her hands covered with Jack's blood, as if she had done it herself. Everyone was caught up in a nightmare with no way out. But when everyone's eyes gradually focused, the first suspicion could not help but turn to Victor. Because in the past, the relationship between Victor and Jack was always fierce competition, full of plots, calculations, and bloody and tearful confrontations. Victor was calmly denying any involvement, but his eyes still contained an unpredictable wariness, making many people shiver. Nick said nothing, just silently observed his father, while Victoria was petrified, her mind constantly repeating the strange image she had seen before. At the exact moment the attack happened, Victoria noticed a strange man appearing in the party area, looking unusual, constantly glancing at the important members of the Newman and Abbott families. When everything was revealed, that man seemed to evaporate from the party, leaving no trace. The more Victoria thought, the more uneasy she felt, because that face was completely unfamiliar, but exuded a very dangerous, cold and challenging aura. She rushed to the police, but in the sea of people at the party, information about the mysterious man was of little help in narrowing down the suspect. Meanwhile, Diane, with a troubled heart, could only pray for Jack to overcome the danger, not knowing that the moment she took her eyes off Jack to get more wine had opened the door for the killer to strike. At the hospital, the doctors struggled to save Jack's life. In the hallway, Diane and Kyle waited in despair. Each passing minute was a torture. Nikki was stunned by the tragedy. No one had the mind to think about her birthday. Victor remained coldly in control, but his eyes turned to everyone in the family, especially Nick and Victoria, as if to see if any of them knew anything more about the incident. The police began to collect every detail, from security cameras to the smallest statements. But every trace of the strange man seemed to be erased. A sense of unease and suspicion spread throughout the mansion, and lingering questions became a common obsession for everyone. Who attacked Jack? What was his purpose? Was it aimed at Jack, or was it a warning to the Newman and Abbott families? Diane fell into a semi-conscious state, constantly mentioning Jack's name, her eyes absent-minded as if she was running away from the cruel reality. Kyle stood by her mother, both encouraging her and blaming himself for not being able to protect his father. Victoria tried to connect the clues, but the deeper she dug, the more haunted she was by the cold gaze of the mysterious man. Doubts began to spread, people looked at each other with wary eyes. Many gossiped that Victor had secretly planned to eliminate Jack, but many also believed that someone had taken advantage of the long-standing feud between the two families to create a perfect drama, pushing everyone into a spiral of suspicion. The tense atmosphere enveloped everyone, each person becoming the subject of suspicion. Nick quietly reassured his mother, but he himself could not hide his anxiety, because he understood that once all the clues were cut off, the culprit was still out there, not excluding the possibility that he would continue to cause other tragedies. Meanwhile, news of Jack's assassination quickly spread throughout the city. The tabloids did not miss the opportunity to make headlines, turning Nikki's birthday party into a collective nightmare. In the hospital waiting room, Diane was almost exhausted, only able to cling to the faint hope that Jack would wake up and reveal the real culprit. But will Jack have enough strength to overcome the scythe of death, and will the mystery of who assassinated him be revealed, or will there be more secrets buried forever in the dark? As night falls, the city is gripped by fear and suspicion, but one thing is certain. Nikki's birthday party will forever be remembered as the most terrifying night, where blood, tears, and unsolved mysteries have blended into a symphony of pain and loss. No one can rest until the real culprit is revealed, and the truth is exposed under the harsh light of justice. But until then, all that can do is wait in suspense, and each person must face the question, who will be the next victim in this never-ending series of tragedies? Lauren hurried down the long hallway with a gloomy face, each step a pent-up anxiety that she could no longer hide. When she reached the office where Nikki was sitting pensively over a cup of tea, Lauren could no longer maintain her usual calm. She knew that this bad news would make Nikki's entire morning heavy, but she could not delay any longer. Without beating around the bush, Lauren informed Nikki that Michael would meet with Victor today to submit his resignation, a decision that Lauren herself had advised against but could not change her husband's mind. The news stunned Nikki. She slammed her teacup down on the table, her eyes wide with shock and worry. Nikki could not imagine that the long-time partnership between Michael and Victor could end so abruptly, especially when Victor himself had always relied on Michael when it came to the boundary between right and wrong. When Jack appeared and sat down next to them, the atmosphere in the room became even heavier. They didn't need to say much to understand the importance of what was about to happen, because everyone knew that Victor Newman was not someone who would let a trusted associate like Michael go without a fight. Jack, with his experienced eyes, admitted that Victor would not let Michael go easily, especially when he had always considered Michael an indispensable part of his big and small plans over the years. Nikki restlessly asserted that Michael could not do this. He was too important to Victor, not only as a talented lawyer but also as a voice of conscience, preventing Victor from crazy actions many times. Lauren, with her practicality, emphasized that this world was not lacking in good lawyers. Victor could always find someone else to replace Michael. But Nikki immediately refuted. She understood better than anyone the influence Michael had on Victor. Michael not only gave sharp legal advice but also strong enough to make Victor hesitate, to reconsider impulsive decisions, to prevent the darkness of Victor's ambition from completely covering the last remaining parts of his humanity. Lauren gently looked at Nikki. Speaking realistically, Michael could no longer act as Victor's conscience. There were limits that Michael could not overcome, especially when his family, hers and Fenmore's, needed him more and more. Jack also agreed. He knew that the pressure from Victor could crush anyone, even a strong man like Michael. Nikki nervously reminded the two that it was not impossible that Victor would turn his anger on Jack, because the relationship between the two men had never been truly peaceful. Jack just smiled faintly. He was too familiar with Victor's revenge, strong enough to confront and confident enough that he would not be easily defeated. However, Jack did not want Michael to sacrifice his peace just to save himself or save someone else from Victor's trap. The atmosphere became tense as everyone understood that, no matter what, Michael's decision to withdraw would leave a huge void, not only for Victor but also for the entire power structure operating in this city. At the Newman farm, Victor appeared as usual with an authoritative demeanor that had not changed after so many storms. He sat behind his desk, his sharp eyes always seemed to see through the thoughts of the person opposite. Michael appeared with a calm but determined appearance. They exchanged daily stories, work and unfinished legal issues. No one mentioned the tension hanging in the air, until Michael gathered up all his courage to clarify the real reason he was here. In a calm but equally decisive voice, Michael informed Victor that he would officially resign, no longer being Victor's representative lawyer or companion. At first, Victor didn't care much, because this was not the first time Michael had expressed his intention to withdraw, and the past had proven many times that Michael always came back whenever Victor needed him, despite many arguments and conflicts. But this time, Michael did not give Victor a chance to convince or plead. He clearly affirmed that this decision did not come from any pressure other than his feelings for Lauren and his own family. He needed to return to being a real husband and father, spending time on what was really important when his youthful years were passing faster than ever. Victor looked at Michael, a smile on the corner of his mouth as if everything was just a joke. He asked Michael if he needed more money, a number large enough to dispel all doubts, attractive enough to make him ignore his moral or family concerns. But Michael calmly shook his head. He was no longer shaken by money. For him, the freedom and peace of his family were the most precious things, values that could not be exchanged for any financial agreement. Michael's blunt refusal made Victor stop. In his eyes appeared a rare look of confusion that perhaps only those close to him could recognize. Victor immediately changed from humor to determination. He declared that he would not accept no from Michael. For Victor, every relationship was a game of power where, as long as he wanted, others would have to obey his will. But Michael was no longer the man who could be manipulated easily as before. He emphasized one last time, with both sincerity and a small hope that Victor would understand, this was the final decision, no one could change it. He begged Victor not to make things more difficult, not to turn his departure into a new war, not to force when everything was exhausted. The space seemed to freeze for a few seconds, only a soft sigh echoed in the pressured room. Victor looked at Michael, his eyes filled with years of attachment, not only as a lawyer but also as a son he once trusted, a person who had saved him from the abyss of mistakes many times. Victor's lips pursed before he spoke quietly but no less sharply, family never abandons family. It was not just a normal saying, but also a warning, an invisible string that Victor used to hold on, to control, to remind Michael that, no matter where he went, what he did, he was still an inseparable part of his life. The conversation ended with a heavy silence. Michael left the farmhouse with a mixture of relief and regret, because even though he had said everything he needed to say, he knew that he could not completely separate himself from Victor's world, could not erase the memories, the favors, and the invisible debts that he had carried for so many years. In the back, Victor sat motionless, contemplating everything that had just happened, his eyes turned out the window, where the gray sky signaled a new storm was about to sweep through the city. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Nikki, Lauren and Jack were still discussing the future without Michael by Victor's side. Nikki was constantly worried about Victor's reaction, about how he would cope with the loss of a friend, a counselor who had played a key role in controlling his most impulsive decisions. Lauren gently touched Nikki's hand, encouraging her to trust Michael's abilities, to trust that he knew what he was doing, and that he knew the limits he needed to keep for himself and his family. Jack was quietly pensive, understanding that the changes around Victor could have unpredictable consequences for anyone who had ever entered his orbit, but he also believed that it was time for Michael to choose between two worlds, and no one could blame him for that. Night fell over Genoa City, and everyone returned to their own worries. Michael returned to Lauren, receiving a warm embrace from his wife who had patiently waited and sacrificed for him. Nikki remained awake all night, praying that things would calm down, that Victor could accept reality and find peace again. And Victor, in the large room, still sat quietly alone, where darkness and power always go hand in hand, constantly wondering where the boundaries of attachment, of love, of power, and whether he could really let someone he considered family leave forever. In that quiet night, the echo of the farewell was not only the end of a working relationship, but also the beginning of new challenges, where each person was forced to face themselves, their choices, their loneliness, and the ghosts of the past that had never let go. And in the distance, when a new chapter of Genoa City opened, no one knew what undercurrents would continue to wash away the fragile beliefs and hopes after so many years of storms. The atmosphere in the Newman mansion became heavier than ever, as if the stone walls could not stop the rising waves of hatred between Victor and Nikki. Although they had overcome many storms together, the cracks in their marriage had not yet healed, especially when the shadow of suspicion and hatred increasingly surrounded not only their feelings but also the fate of the family. Things became even more complicated when rumors of Jack's murder suddenly spread throughout Genoa City, and none other than Victor was the most mentioned name on the list of suspects. The whispers not only appeared in the tabloids, but also crept into the luxurious corridors, where every conversation was filled with fear and suspicion, especially when everyone knew that the eternal feud between Victor and Jack had never really ended. In the large but cold office, Victor sat quietly behind the antique oak desk, his deep eyes filled with countless calculations. When Michael entered, both of them knew that this conversation would mark the end of a long chapter in their relationship. Not wasting time on polite greetings, Victor went straight to the point, his eyes shining with the familiar determination mixed with a bit of coldness, questioning Michael about the real reason behind his sudden decision to resign. Michael had wanted to leave many times, but he had never shown such determination as this time, and that made Victor unable to help but doubt. Was it all because of Jack? Or were there deeper calculations that Victor himself had not yet realized? Michael calmly replied, emphasizing that although Victor was an extraordinary man, who had made many opponents fear him, the implacable enmity with Jack had become a huge burden, not only for Victor but also for many other innocent people in danger. Michael recalled an old memory, when Ian Ward had once threatened the Newman family with a gun in this very house, and despite the dangerous situation, Michael had chosen to stay, not leaving even a step, because he had considered Victor an important part of his life. He reminded Victor of the debt of gratitude that day, of the promise Victor had once made to him. That he owed Michael something, and now Michael wanted to reclaim that favor, nothing more than leaving in peace, without conflict, without hatred. Victor looked at Michael for a long time, the lines on his face seemed to be more engraved by age and power, but deep in the depths of his eyes there was still a rare glimmer of emotion. It is not easy to accept that a partner, someone who has fought side by side in so many power struggles, has now let go and left, especially when Victor is so used to controlling, dominating, and keeping everything within his grasp. But this time, Michael's firmness and determination made it impossible for Victor not to accept. He could only choose to say the last cold words. He never wanted to hear the name Michael Baldwin mentioned again in this house, as if completely cutting off all remaining connections between the two. Just as Michael was about to leave, Nikki returned. The scene she encountered in the house stunned Nikki. She almost did not recognize the two men in front of her anymore. Michael silently bowed his head to say goodbye to Nikki, their eyes met, containing so many things that had not been said yet. Nikki tried to stay calm, although her heart was in turmoil because she was afraid that Victor would sink deeper into extreme decisions. No one would be able to hold him back from the next wave of revenge. When Michael was gone, Victor only said one cold, decisive sentence, like a curse: she was never allowed to mention the name Michael Baldwin again, and from now on, everything related to him must disappear from Victor's world. Genoa City enters uncertain days, where all eyes are waiting for the truth to be revealed, where all relationships are tested by power, hatred, love and loyalty. Each person in that vortex must choose for themselves a direction, continue to commit, fight to protect themselves and their loved ones, or accept to step back, give way to the past to sleep, knowing very well that, in this city, all grudges have their price, and no one can escape the consequences it brings.